here. Today I'm going to talk about hardcore punk, emo, and then about how hardcore punk became emo.
It just takes some time, little girl, and a little out the right.
Emo is a genre characterized by its emotional, confessional lyrics. Initially, emo took place in the 80s Washington, D.C. hardcore scene, and later broke into mainstream in the 21st century. So, how did an aggressive, reckless, political, let's revolt against society genre as hardcore became emo, which is deeply personal, mostly apolitical, relationships and feelings indulged, intimate and vulnerable?
Some people say that hardcore is America's response to the UK punk movement, including Sex Pistols, The Clash, and The Damned. However, American hardcore is a more aggressive, louder, and a faster form of punk music.
Formed in 1976 in Los Angeles, California, Black Flag are rated as the godfathers of hardcore.
In 1979, Black Flag released the debut EP, Nervous Breakdown, with the independent label SST Records.
That Black Flag single was life-changing for us. Nervous Breakdown, one of the greatest records ever released in my opinion. MacKaye of Threads and Fugazi said, both Black Flag and SST Records are the brainchild of Black Flag guitarist Ginn, a quiet, mysterious, and hard-working entrepreneur.
Black Flag and SST Records demonstrated that if you do not like the assistant, you can simply create your own.
In 1981, joined by the Washington, D.C. native punk rock fan Henry Rollins, Black Flag released their debut studio album, Damaged, an album considered representative of the 1980s California hardcore scene.
The starting song of the album, Rise Above, with its raging velocity and ferocity, might be the generational anthem of the disaffected youth during the Ronald Reagan era.
We are born with a chance. Rise above, we're gonna rise above. And I am gonna have my chance.
Much of hardcore punk's culture is about anti-establishment, anti-corporate, equality, and the belief that they are able to meaningfully change the status quo.
Black Flag's later albums, such as My War and The Process of Weeding Out, expanded the territory of punk by incorporating elements of jazz and progressive rock. The inclusion of improvisation and unusual polyrhythms by Black Flag also contributed to the development of math rock and Midwest-emo. Other representative early Southern Californian hardcore punk bands are Descendents, Bad Religion, Wasted Youth, Agent Orange, and the Adolescents. One of the most prominent scenes of the hostile and angry hardcore took place in the epicenter of global political power, the American capital, Washington, D.C. The D.C. hardcore scene started with the reggae-influenced band Bad Brains, who are widely influential in hardcore, metal, and grunge. Influenced by Black Flag and Bad Brains, MacKaye, who is also a friend of Henry Rollins, formed the definite hardcore band Minor Threat in 1980.
Minor Threats are even faster, harder, and more aggressive than former hardcore bands, as if they were just aiming to perform the stereotypical angry young man music.
If Black Flag established the constitutional basics of the hardcore kingdom, then Minor Threat formed the religion called Straight Edge, establishing the hardcore aesthetics, ethos, and doctrines.
Straight edge!
Straight Edge speaks against alcohol, drugs, and sexual promiscuity while promoting vegetarianism and self-control.
MacKaye and Jeff Nelson of Minor Threat also founded Disco Records in 1980, which includes other Washington, D.C. hardcore or alternative rock bands such as Government Issue, The Faith, Beefeater, Embrace, Rites Spring, Nation of Ulysses, Jawbox, Shudder to Think, and Fugazi.
The fact that Brains and Minor Threats all focus more on external rage rather than internal turmoil, politics rather than relationships, community rather than individuals.
However, one band from the DC hardcore scene, Rites Spring, who are also widely regarded as the first emo band, radically changed the dynamics of the punk music.
Rites Spring only lasted 3 years and only played 14 shows in total, and those who had been to the performance of Rites Spring claimed that the audience actually cried at their shows. Yeah.
If I can sing in the water.
Once you saw them, they just didn't hold back at all. They were completely charismatic. There wasn't any real distinction from the role of the audience and the role of the band. There was this insane connection. As soon as you saw it, you wanted it. I think for a lot of people of a young age, where you are finding yourself and your peers, it was hard not to feel that it wasn't the coolest thing in the entire world.
The lyrics of Rites Spring are poetic, introspective, and majestic, sharing a few similarities with the lyrics of the Smiths, like a troubadour lamenting his loss, melancholy, and loneliness.
I can feel the soul falling over my head. I could walk around and fall in love with a face or two, but it wouldn't be you. Love is natural and real, not for such as you and I.
But I would say the Smiths are way more asexual than Rites Spring, who are romantic and passionate. Ian MacKaye of Minor Threats said that emo is an oversimplified term.
I must say, emo-core must be the stupidest fucking thing I've ever heard in my entire life. I read in my Thrasher the other day that in fact, what my band, along with other bands in the city, was playing was emo-core. I'm thinking emo Phillips, comedian, Ian-core? Why no, emotional hardcore. As if hardcore wasn't emotional to begin with.
There is certainly some truth to Ian MacKaye's words. Hasn't it always been the case that music is about emotions? Is anger not an emotion? Happiness not an emotion? Does only teenage angst get a special label as emo? Some people say that Pet Sounds by the Beach Boys was the first emo album. How do you think?
I guess I just wasn't made for these times.
Well, there are certainly many bands before Rites Spring that have sing about young adolescents' feeling. It wasn't until Rites Spring that a whole album was dedicated to introspective, self-searching content that combined hardcore's visceral vocal, aggression, and intensity. Emo was born out of hardcore punk and is essentially emotional punk music. Hardcore's velocity and ferocity as well provides Rites Spring's emotions a sense of the profound and majestic. A music scene needs the right background, the right timing, the right audience, and a timely music journalist to properly nail it to take place.
Inspired by Rites Spring, Ian MacKaye formed the band Embrace that also explored emotional release. Beefeater, Embrace, Rites Spring, and Deck Nasty were the main DC punk bands that participated in the social movement called Revolution Summer in the summer of 1985. In 1986, an all-female DC punk band called Fire Party was born, who are also suggested as being the first female emo band. Also in 1986, Rites Spring disbanded, and the vocalist of Rites Spring, Guy Picciotto, together with Ian MacKaye, formed the influential post-hardcore band called Fugazi.
The 80s Washington DC hardcore bands were short-lived but influential, and their influence later spread beyond the Washington DC. The 1990s emo bands are sometimes labeled as second-wave emo, who are lighter, more melodic, and blend with the influences of the alternative rock.
The Californian band Jawbreaker are a combination of DC emo and 1980s alternative rock bands such as Hüsker and their replacements.
Oftentimes, Jawbreaker's lyrics were taken directly from the frontman, Blake Schwarzenbach's diary, without further editing, singing about insomnia, alcohol, and heartbreak.
It gets loneliest at night, down at the liquor store. I kissed the bottle, I should have been kissing you.
Jawbreaker has later influenced At the Drive-In, Fall Out Boys, and My Chemical Romance. Among Rolling Stone's 40 greatest emo albums of all time, the first place goes to the Seattle band Sunny Day Real Estate's album Diary from 1994. The album Diary was released only a month after Kurt Cobain's death. If the grunge kids were looking for the next idol to attach to, Sunny Day Real Estate's frontman, Jeremy Enigk, might have been a good fit, who is just as angsty as Kurt Cobain, less detached, and only more heartfelt.
In my limited scope of alternative music, the vocalist of Sunny Day Real Estate, Jeremy Enigk, might be like the top 10 or top 20 vocalists who can actually sing. His voice is earnest, pure, and can pull off high notes fairly easily. By the way, if you like Sunny Day Real Estate, I highly recommend a 90s indie rock band called Ginn, who are often referred as slowcore, but I think they are more emo. The Problem With Me is an amazing album that I have been obsessed with now for a long time.
In the 1990s, there were numerous bands from Midwest America featuring arpeggio melodies and math rock influence, such as Cap and Jazz, Braid, The Promise Ring, The Get Up Kids, Joan of Arc, and American Football. They are usually called Midwest-emo. In case you don't know, there are also two bands called Chinese Football and Canadian Softball.
Guess which team will win World Cup?
Outside of Midwest, in the 90s, there were also emo bands such as Jimmy Eat World, Texas Is the Reason, and Mineral. This was a period when emo earned many, if not all, of the stereotypes that persist to this day: young adult male-centric, glasses-wearing, overly sensitive, overly brainy, Jimmy guitar-driven college music.
By the way, I would like to ask a question. Because I'm not really from the United States, so I probably am missing some kind of cultural context here. Why is there is such a lack of female emo bands, despite the fact that there are quite a lot of female emo audience listeners, especially about the 21st century emo bands such as My Chemical Romance, Fall Out Boy, Panic at the Disco. So many female listeners, but there are just not many female emo bands at all. Or maybe there are female emo bands that I don't know. Yeah, so I'd like to know. Personally, I think it might be just hard for women to form a band because there are just not many women who are into playing rock instruments and that kind of thing. And also emo was born out of hardcore, and hardcore is kind of aggressive, and I think a lot of girls are not quite into that. So usually I guess a female musician who wants to express their emotions, they usually become kind of like a singer-songwriter, folk artist, or just, yeah, more of a singer-songwriter rather than to form a band. Yeah, all has no different opinions.
A subgenre of emo, screamo, which is characterized by screaming vocals, also emerged.
Because the emphasis of this video is about how hardcore became emo, rather than any specific bands. I know many people like Midwest-emo a lot. If anyone wants to see a video about Midwest-emo more specifically, please comment down below. So the above was a brief summary of how hardcore became emo. Despite the fact that the birth of emo was directly linked to hardcore, the term emo has developed itself with time and become more and more difficult to define. Different people simply have different ways to define emo.
There are numerous debates about who are the real original emo bands and who are the fake emo bands.
I am the real emo. No, I am the real emo. You are fake emo. No, I am the real. You are fake. No, you, me, you, me. Supporting Stella on Patreon is the real emo.
In the book Nothing Feels Good, Punk Rock Teenagers and Emos by Greenwald, one of the narrators, Christine Laughter, claimed that emo clearly shows the connection between 20th century American punk and 19th century French Romanticism.
And the characteristics of Romanticism are a general exaltation of emotion over reason, and of the senses over intellect, salvation of nature, isolation and melancholy, focus on the individual and spirituality, idealization of woman.
Personally, I think that there are some connections between Romanticism and emo music, but not wholly so. Personally, I think emo music could be summarized by re-rendering René Descartes' declaration, I feel, therefore I am. The original was I think, therefore I am.
Emo is a specific sort of teenage longing, a romantic and ultimately self-centered need to understand the bigness of the world in relation to you. In short, everyone has their own emo. Emo is an essential element of being a teenager.
By the author Greenwald's definition, emo is whatever that could spur a deeper emotion in you. And my personal teen emo bands are The Smiths, The Cure, and Molly Smells. Even though they are usually not tagged as emo bands, they were my go-to bands to deal with my teen angst back in the day as an awkward and alienated teenager. Part of being a teenager is that even the tiny thing can be amount to almighty importance, and emo music justifies that. So at the end, I would like to ask, what is your favorite decade of emo music, and what is your personal favorite wave of emo music? Also, what were your personal teenage emo bands back in the days? Okay, so that's the end of the video, and if you like this video, please give a like button down below. And you're also welcome to share your thoughts in the comment section down below as well. If you want to access more of my content, you can check out my Patreon. And also, as always, thanks to my patrons. Thank you very much. And I hope you have a good Thanksgiving holiday, and see you next video. Bye bye.